Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1260 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today, I'll be speaking with a returning guest. This anonymous female was initially on episode 336, After Dark, Depression, and Self-Harm, and today we're going to get a follow-up from her. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. To save 30% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com, all you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. I just got a package from Cozy Earth this morning, and I am super excited to put on my new shorts. Tickets for the 2025 Juice Cruise are limited. I'm not just saying that, they actually are limited. We have a certain window to sell them in, and then that's it. Juiceboxpodcast.com, scroll down to the Juice Cruise banner, click on it, find a cabin that works for you, and register right now. You are absolutely limited by time on this one. I'm so sorry to say that. It sounds pushy, but it's the absolute truth. Juice Cruise 2025. I hope to see you there. We're going to get a tan, talk about diabetes, and meet a ton of great people who are living with diabetes. It's kind of going to be like floating diabetes camp, but you won't have to sleep in a log cabin. You'll get a tan, and it's not just for adults or kids. It's for everybody. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by AG1. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. Head there now to learn more about AG1. It's vegan-friendly, gluten-free, dairy-free, non-GMO, no sugar added, no artificial sweeteners. And when you make your first order with my link, you're going to get AG1 and a welcome kit that includes a shaker, scoop, and canister. You're also going to get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D with that first order at drinkag1.com/juicebox. The episode you're listening to is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. You can get your diabetes testing supplies the same way we do from US Med. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Everyone, I'm back with a returning guest who will be remaining anonymous as they were in their first episode, which was called, it was episode 336. It was in one of the first After Darks. It's called Depression and Self-Harm. We had to call you something though, or no, do you want to make up a name? Did we make up a name last time?
We didn't make up a name.
All right. Well, then let's not make up. Let's stay consistent. No making up a name. So you were 24 then, and I really suggest to people to go listen to the episode. You were one of the first people to be that incredibly honest with me. And it was really eye-opening for me, taught me a lot. But then afterwards, you and I maintained contact for quite some time. So
yes,
can we start with that? Why did that happen, and was it valuable to you, etc.?
Yeah. So after I reached out to you, I was in a really, I feel just, I guess, lost spot. Mm-hmm. You and I kept having our conversations, and you really wanted me to reach out to a therapist or just somebody, not you, that could help me, truly help me, and not just be like a sound support, I feel.
Right.
And so I started doing that, and that was really helpful. I have more than just like depression issues and self-harm issues. So she was really able to help me dive deeper into, what's the root of my issues, I guess.
Sure.
And then I thought I was doing really good, being in a better place. And then COVID hit.
And that wasn't good for you?
And then it pretty much took me back to square one because, the media tells you diabetics are high risk and all of that stuff. And it just scared me.
Okay.
So then I went into a major depression. Like I would shower 10 to 15 times a day because it was something I could control.
Wow. And let me ask you a question, because if you asked me to recall that time, I would say that beyond lost, I couldn't tell how much, I didn't know what you were in control of for yourself, like the important things, not like pretend control where you're pretending to control something. But like, do you recall, for example, that I researched and called a mental health facility for you?
See, no.
You don't know that, do you? Huh? That is exactly what I've always been wondering, because I don't know the word to describe your state at that point when we were talking. But I remember saying like, hey, I really want you to get in touch with somebody. And then you sent me a lot of messages. Some of them were disjointed. And at some points, my wife would say, oh, you're not ever going to be free of this puppy. And and I was like, no. I'm like, I'm going to help her. And at one point I ended up online. I found, because I forget why you couldn't figure out where to go, but I actually called a place. I spoke with them. I remember starting the conversation by saying, this is going to sound incredibly odd, but I host a podcast and someone who was a guest on my show recently needs help, and they're not going to get it without somebody like setting it up for them. And I set that first meeting up for you. Wow. You don't remember that at all, huh?
No.
Wow. Is that odd for you to hear?
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because I'm in such a different mindset now, and just my whole life is so different from 4 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, I'm sorry. So we're in the shower in COVID. I don't know when you're eating, because 15 times is a lot every day. And can you walk through the COVID time without it like being triggering to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was a senior at my university, and so I was student teaching kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, because I remember talking to you about the struggles of some of my kindergartners and how it was really affecting me.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out how to deal with that. But all of a sudden, when COVID hit, I never saw any of them again. And that was pretty traumatizing. And then thankfully, now he's my ex-husband, him and I had a beautiful property that we just hunkered down and stayed there for a while. I never went out. I started, well, besides cigars, I started smoking pot a lot more, just to kind of take myself out of my inner body, I guess, and change my mental state so I wasn't so focused on everything around me.
Yeah, I do recall like those little kids' problems were getting imprinted onto you, and you were kind of suffering with them and unable to help them. And then you're saying then having them taken away from you was bad because then you didn't know if they were okay. Was that the problem? If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
Yeah, and I still have never even seen pictures, faces, nothing ever again in 4 years.
They're okay, trust me. They're in like 3rd grade now. They're balling out of control.
No kidding.
Living their best life. They're fine. So along the way, I didn't know that about the COVID thing, but I do remember you reaching out and saying, like, I'm getting married. And I remember thinking, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea or not. And it was only based on like what you had shared. Obviously, all of this what's based on what you shared in the podcast and, sometimes back and forth in writing. But I felt like, and I guess you can tell me in hindsight now, my remembrance is that I don't feel like you had a very sexual relationship with him when you were just dating. Is that
correct?
That's correct. Okay. And then how do you get past that and move to getting married?
Well, because we had been together basically all through high school, all through college, and I think it just made sense for both of us. And he was a year behind me at the university, and we get married in the summer, and I had graduated at that point. I found a job teaching while he was still getting his teaching license in school. And unfortunately, the job was like 3 hours away. Thankfully, I had family down by my teaching job because I just kind of moved in with them. My husband and my ex-husband and I thought everything was going to be fine until he pretty much didn't want to be in my life. I was the only one making a point to try in our relationship.
Okay.
And so I just was like, I'm not going to be in this if I'm the only, because he pretty much told me I'm done trying.
And in fairness to him, were you blocking his advances when he was trying?
No.
You were open to it at that point.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay.
And then we ended up getting a divorce, and my current husband, him and I knew each other from school. He's a little older than me, and we just kind of reconnected after that. And now we have 2 kids, and he has a stepson. So it's been so much better. Just, I think, finding a person that I connect with, but also knowing that my mental headspace is in a better place. But it has been rocky with postpartum and those type of things with both of my pregnancies.
Yeah, no, I want to know about that. But first, your first is with your ex and the second is with your current. Is that right?
No, they're both with my current.
Oh, okay. Oh, so his stepson is not with you. It's with somebody else. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that was like, just hearing you now say that you were divorced, I thought that doesn't make sense. She has those kids. This has been such a short amount of time. I was like, how could that be? But now I got it. Now I'm completely like square on what's going on. Before you had children, how much time was there between divorcing your ex and marrying your current husband? Like how much time was in there?
My first child was more of a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
He was very fresh post-divorce. And then my husband and I didn't get married until last August. And my son will be 2 in a couple days.
Okay. So maybe you had a baby together for 1.5 years or so before you got married.
Yeah.
I got you. All right. Well then.
And then our daughter was born this last summer in July.
Just recently. Oh, congratulations. Very nice. It's lovely. Just stop. Trust me. Stop there. One of each is perfect. You don't really need to do more.
Oh, there's no chance I can now.
Why is that?
Well, I'll back up with my boy. When I was pregnant with him, I ended up getting Bell's palsy and occipital neuralgia.
Did it go away?
Yes, eventually. The Bell's palsy I got in September, had my baby boy in October, and it didn't go away until January.
Oh, wow. That's a long time for something like that. Did they tell you why it happened?
No, I have no idea. I woke up the morning of my baby shower, and my mother, being a very honest person, going, "What's wrong with your face?" I don't know, Mom. I'm just here. So then the next day I went to the hospital and Bell's palsy.
Were you preeclamptic by any chance?
So with my son, no. With my daughter, this last pregnancy, yes.
I asked because I looked online and it says that Bell's palsy is very uncommon during pregnancy, but if it occurs, it may be the primary sign of preeclampsia.
Yeah. So I was never diagnosed with preeclampsia with my son, but with my daughter this summer, I had preeclampsia with her and ended up trying to be induced at 37 weeks. She didn't take the Pitocin, and so I ended up having her via C-section. And at 37 weeks, she was over 9 pounds.
Oh my gosh. How was your blood sugars during the pregnancy?
The best I've been diabetic 16 years now. I had the best A1Cs during my 2 pregnancies.
Okay, excellent.
For my son, my highest A1C was 6.6 in my 3rd trimester. And that's when a lot of the insulin resistance happens.
Yeah.
And then with my daughter, during my 3rd trimester, the highest was 6.4.
Okay. Well, you did great.
And then postpartum, because my daughter ended up staying in the NICU for over a month. Her blood sugars weren't even registering on the machine or equipment, whatever, when she was born. And so she went straight to the NICU, and I didn't see her for about 5 hours.
She was born with low blood sugar?
Yeah, her sugar wasn't even registering on when they took it.
Oh, wow. Did they ever tell you what they thought that was?
They just kept referring to her as IDM. Oh, this is really common with an IDM. And they're an infant of a diabetic mother. And I was like, well, none of this happened with my first. So I guess it's not that common.
It's all new to me.
Yeah.
And scary. And thank you.
Yeah. And so while she and my husband went to the NICU, I opted to get my tubes tied.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. You were like, we're done. That's good.
Yeah. Because I had a very difficult time with just my body with both pregnancies.
How so? What were some of the issues you had?
Just with the Bell's palsy and the occipital neuralgia. The local hospital is not the best hospital. And so I ended up with my son delivering him 3 hours away. And then with my daughter, 3 hours a different way in actually a different state.
I looked up the occipital neuralgia because I didn't know. Condition in which the occipital nerves, the nerves that run through the scalp, are injured or inflamed, causing headaches that feel like severe piercing, throbbing, or shock-like pain in the upper neck, back of head, and behind the ears. That's what you had?
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I don't want that either.
And I couldn't, when I would go lay down at night, I couldn't sleep for longer than 10 minutes without that pain shooting up the back of my head and dispersing throughout my whole head.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to go backwards a little bit. So we're in COVID. You're having a bad reaction in COVID. Are you taking any kind of medication for then? And can you tell people what, if any, diagnosis you got through your mental health care since you've been on the show? You've probably heard me talk about US Med and how simple it is to reorder with US Med using their email system. But did you know that if you don't see the email and you're set up for this, you have to set it up. They don't just randomly call you, but I'm set up to be called if I don't respond to the email because I don't trust myself 100%. So one time I didn't respond to the email and the phone rings at the house. It's ring, you know how it works. And I picked it up. I was like, hello. And it was just a recording. It was like, US Med. Doesn't actually sound like that, but you know what I'm saying. It said, hey, I don't remember exactly what it says, but it's basically hey, your order's ready. You want us to send it? Push this button if you want us to send it. Or if you'd like to wait, I think it lets you put it off a couple of weeks, or push this button for that. That's pretty much it. I pushed the button to send it, and a few days later, box right at my door. That's it. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get your free benefits checked now and get started with US Med. Dexcom, Omnipod, Tandem, Freestyle. They've got all your favorites. Even that new eyelet pump. Check them out now at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and to all of the sponsors. AG1 fits perfectly into my morning routine. I get out of bed, head downstairs, say hi to the dog, let him outside. While Basil's running around, I mix up my AG1, drink it down, rinse out my container, and by the time he's done doing his business, AG1 has me ready to do mine. AG1 posts online about their studies, and here's some interesting stuff that they've learned. At the 30-day mark with AG1, 80% of people in a research study noticed less gas and bloating. At 60 days, 91% of people in that research study noticed that they needed less coffee. And at 90 days, after just 3 months with AG1, 97% of people in a research study felt digestion had improved. If there's one product I trust to support my whole body health, it's AG1. And that's why I've partnered with them for so long. It's easy and satisfying to start your journey with AG1. Just try AG1 with my link, and you'll get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/juicebox. That's drinkag1.com/juicebox. Check it out.
Well, I continue to take Prozac. They put me on that, and I feel like I've done really good on it. In high school, I got seasonal depression was my, the title of what I got and my diagnosis. And of course, living where I was in college, seasonal depression is very common just because it does not, in the winter, you never see the sun.
Right.
It just rains all day long, every day. And I even tried getting one of those like special lights that you put on.
Right.
That just gives you the vitamin D or whatever. And just trying different combinations. I would say my drinking and my pot smoking went up a lot. And so I think at that point I was still needing some type of support where I didn't really have it from my ex-husband. So I found it in drinking and smoking.
Yeah. And that support really from the alcohol and the weed, that's just trying to get out of your own head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you weren't doing those things, how were you feeling?
If I wasn't doing a project or like if I didn't have my mind busy with something, I was sleeping. So I literally didn't have time to myself, I guess, in my own head.
Okay. Yeah. So just constant thinking, worrying, obsessing on stuff, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then when I started teaching, and I had my own classroom and stuff, my family also has a ranch. And so on the weekends, I would just go help my family on the ranch just to get so tired that I would go home, take a shower, and be out by 7:00 at night.
Just the day just ruined you almost. Just took everything out of you. Yeah. Okay. Oh, geez. So, is your regimen pretty much the same? And then what do you do when you're pregnant? You can't take Prozac when you're pregnant, can you?
I did.
You did. Okay.
Well, no, let me change that. I was supposed to. The only thing I ended up just taking, because with both pregnancies, I was extremely nauseous. The morning sickness was not very kind to me. So I stopped taking all medication. Well, everything but like my Omnipod and my Dexcom.
Right.
Like those were just easy. But I also take thyroid. I take levothyroxine and my Prozac. And at the time, prenatal, I couldn't take any of that.
They just all made you feel nauseous.
Yeah.
Oh.
More than the baby.
Yeah. Did the thyroid, not having the thyroid medication, did that get things out of whack for you?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can't be without that long. That stuff has a very short shelf life in your body. Like it doesn't last long if you're not taking it. So
yeah. And then with my second pregnancy, I ended up having to like almost triple my thyroid medication. And I was also seeing a doctor like literally every other week, whether it was here or my endocrinologist 3 hours away.
And you were able to tolerate it with the second pregnancy, just not the first.
Yeah.
The medication. Oh, that's interesting too. Yeah, bodies are weird. Did that nausea stay with you for 9 months or did it leave at some point?
The nausea, it left eventually, like by the halfway through my second trimester, it was gone. But then it was kind of when, not necessarily the preeclampsia started, I found out about a month before I had her, I was at a maternal fetal medicine appointment and they had done blood work, and the doctor came in and goes, "What is your blood sugar right now?" And I mean, it was under 130. And he goes, "I don't think you're in DKA, but your blood work is showing me that you're in DKA." And I was like, my last A1C was 6.2. My blood sugar rarely gets above 150 right now. And I ended up getting hospitalized for the night because after running more tests, they realized that I was eating so little just because I wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
I was eating so little that the food that I was eating was going straight to the baby and leaving my body in like a ketosis state.
Yeah, I was going to say you were in ketosis, which can be confusing when they look at some basic testing. Oh, okay. So yeah, you didn't have ketones from high blood sugars. You had ketones from like starvation almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
because with my first child, my starting base weight was 160. And and I'll tell you, I kind of skipped this. In between my son and my daughter, we experienced a miscarriage.
Oh.
And that really played a toll on my depression. Just because it was, very early. We just there was never a heartbeat. But of course that, plays a big toll because my body missed it. Like I never naturally had the miscarriage. I had to go get a DNC.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. And so,
How soon after your son's birth was that?
well, it was June of last year. So 22.
Okay, Jesus. What does it look like when you're depressed now? So like day to day, how would you describe your, like the lightness or lack of lightness in your mind?
I would say it's gotten better in the sense of since my daughter was born, she spent 33 days in the NICU. And I was there the whole time. With my job, I was on maternity leave, but with my job, I was able to work from remotely. So my husband had to come back home. And thankfully, we live in a small enough area that my in-laws and my parents helped with my son and my stepson and just trying to make sure somebody could stay with my daughter or our daughter that over a month. And so being 3 hours away from home, being alone, being in a very depressing place. I mean, I was very thankful that my daughter was a chunk and she was at the point that I could hold her like in her crib. They have different stages of cribs and she was at a point that I could hold her. She wasn't fragile like some of her neighbors and,
Right.
In boxes, but it played a toll on me. And it got to the point that I would get there, go later and later in the day. All I wanted to do was sleep because I thought this is such a depressing place. And then I would hold her for 6 or 7 hours solid, put her down because I knew she was getting taken care of. I knew they were feeding her. She was the biggest baby in the NICU, so people loved holding her. And I would just go to the bar and drink.
Oh my gosh. How long was she there for?
33 days.
Did you drink while you were pregnant?
No.
No. How did you stop yourself from smoking weed and drinking while you were pregnant?
The drinking was easy because I didn't want to do anything. In the beginning of my pregnancy, when I was nauseous, I would smoke just enough to like curb the nausea feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I was smoking blunt after blunt or, those type of things. It was literally maybe 1 or 2 hits and it curbed it. So then I could go take a shower or go do something and not feel like crap.
Yeah, I understand. So, but as soon as she's there, you the alcohol kind of pulled you back quickly.
Yes. Well, and especially because we live in a pro marijuana state where it's legal, and we had her in a state that it wasn't legal.
Do you think if you were at a hospital where it was legal, you would have smoked instead of drank?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. If you were just going for what was available.
Yes. And I realized very quickly, I remember why I slowed down on the drinking is I hate the feeling it gives me. But it didn't stop me. I would go every night because it took me a long time to get out of the hospital once I had her, because my preeclampsia stayed for like 2 more weeks. And I ended up having to get a magnesium drip line. And it was just very traumatizing
a lot
for
was
me.
Happening. Where's your husband and your son while you're at the bar?
They were back home because my husband continued to work.
Oh, so you were by yourself at this hospital?
Yeah, I was I stayed at the Ronald McDonald House by myself, would walk over to the hospital and be with our daughter by myself. And my husband would come over like on his weekends.
When you're at a bar in the evening in that scenario, does your husband know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so were you managing with alcohol? Have you been managing with alcohol all the way through, just not during your pregnancies?
My husband's family doesn't really drink. And so like my mother-in-law might have like an occasional cocktail, like if we go out for something special.
Right.
Otherwise, they don't drink. And so I just I'm not going to buy, at this point in my life, I'm not going to buy a 12-pack of something and be the only one to drink it.
So you weren't drinking much at all for those couple of years there. But once you were, what would you tell me was driving you to go to the bar after the baby? Like, was it anxiety or depression, or what did you have going on as soon as she was born?
I feel a lot of it was like what you said, anxiety and depression, trying to figure out like just how to escape my mind, because they couldn't give us a time frame. It's all up to her because her blood sugars, she had so much fluid in her lungs and she came out like purple. And so she just instantly got a feeding tube put in her nose and a CPAP machine. And she was on those for at least 4 or 5 days. And then nobody could, she was struggling eating in general. And that's what kept her in there, was she couldn't figure out how to take milk from a bottle.
Oh, I see.
Because with both of my pregnancies, I wasn't able to produce milk.
So you knew you weren't going to breastfeed immediately when she was born.
Yeah. And so that was also one thing. I knew I could go and have a couple drinks and it not affect her.
Right. Wow. That's a lot. So her being sick, was that a driver for you? Was that upsetting for you? Was it just that you were by yourself or that you were far from home? Do you think it was all those things together?
Oh, definitely a combination, because then I was trying to figure out, I was talking to maternal fetal medicine once a week because they wanted to do like checkups on my blood pressure and my C-section incision. So they always said, postpartum depression can be very real, and especially when your baby's in the NICU. So please don't feel like you're a burden to reach out to us, because we will find somebody for you to talk to. I never reached out, but my husband was, him and I talked a lot, and every time the doctors made their rounds, I'd call him and give him the updates and all of those things. And so I think as the weeks went on, that she wasn't leaving there. That's when I could just feel the shadow or the darkness just continue to like spread inside me. And because there were days like at the beginning, I would go see her at 7 a.m. And by the end of it, I was seeing her 1, 2 in the afternoon. I'd stay until 4 or 5, and then I'd go to the bar.
When you get home, does all that just stop? Or do you continue?
Like when we finally came back home with her out of the hospital.
Yeah. Are you drinking again? Or are you like, well, I drink now again? Or does it just go away?
I might have an occasional like hard cider, but I only limit myself to 1, and it has to be after 6 o'clock. But I smoke a lot more weed
to try to maintain. And what's your diagnosis again? Can you remind me?
For what?
For why are you taking the Prozac?
Anxiety and depression.
Okay. There's no talk of like bipolar or personalities.
No.
Not just that.
No.
Okay. If you didn't smoke, so you smoke weed daily, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. If you didn't, what would happen?
I don't do it when I'm alone with our kids because it gives me paranoia.
Okay.
Because I'm scared that I'm going to fall asleep or something. And so usually I just do it at night to go to bed because that's the hardest time for me is at night.
Going to sleep is hard.
Yeah.
Your mind races, can't stop thinking about things, that kind of stuff.
Yes, because I feel like I have, like, with my job and my master's program and our children, and just, I feel like I'm going nonstop. Mm-hmm. And that's really the only thing that kind of just resets me, and I'm able to fall asleep within minutes.
I see. But the rest of the day, you do well with the kids?
If they're not driving me crazy. Because my son is in the terrible twos, so.
Just running around screaming and throwing things?
Pretty much, yeah. And so a lot of the time, like when they're both sleeping, like I'll take my shower about like midday to try to recenter myself because that's always worked for me, like during COVID and when I was younger. So that helps me a lot through like the rest of the day.
Right. And none of this is hidden. Like your husband knows all about all of this.
Yep.
Is he involved in helping you at all? Are there things that you need from him?
Him and I, every evening, like before I actively try to go to bed, him and I sit and talk. Like after we put our kids to bed, we talk just about our day. And when I'm struggling, I don't wait to text or like if he's at work, I don't wait to tell him about how I'm doing that night. Usually I will text him or call him if I am like really struggling. Mm-hmm. And he is able to just help me, you're a great mom, just affirmations that I know I try really hard to be a great mom. And so there are times that I might smoke just a little bit just to have the edge off. And then I can really focus on being present with my children because, they from 0 to 2 is so developmentally important.
Yeah, they need a lot. That's for sure.
And so just by taking that edge off, I sit with I'll hold my little girl and play with my 2-year-old and we go on walks. And it's just, I don't have the mental load on anymore, and which is very comforting. And I think my children are benefiting, from me not having to deal with everything going on in my head.
Right. Do you have any intimacy issues with your husband like you did with the previous person?
No, it's completely like
different.
180.
Okay. And you don't have any intimacy issues with the kids, it doesn't sound like. So it sounds like you're close with them and loving with them and all that stuff. But it's one of the things that stuck out from the conversation last time with me. It's interesting. So my next question is, are you actively cutting yourself?
No.
Oh, good for you.
But the thought is always there.
Okay.
I haven't cut myself since, the beginning of COVID.
Well, that's a long time.
But yeah. But I would say I probably think about that, doing it, like the act of doing it, at least once a month.
Okay.
But I never go through with it, but I'm like, that I know that's something I can control. I control how deep it goes. I control how many times I do it. And to me, that was like one of the biggest satisfactions
of actually the process of doing it.
Yeah.
All the control that was involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember you. Trust me. I remember you explaining it to me. My conversation with you last time it helped shape a lot of things that I didn't understand previously. And
really?
And that I just you would expose me to so many ideas that I didn't know about, and you were just so clear and like honest about them that you taught me a lot. But I'm thrilled for you. That's really exciting.
Yeah, I feel, in such a better place overall right now.
Your speech pattern's even different.
Really?
Yeah. It's really something. I remember talking to you and thinking that at the end of every one of your sentences, it almost felt like there was a voice that wanted to go, "Oh my God, everything's terrible. Woe is me. Help me, please." Like at the end of everything you said, it felt like that was going to keep coming. And you don't sound like that now. It's really, really interesting to talk to you again.
It'll be interesting to hear my first episode, because I remember one of the things I remember you telling me was, don't listen to your episode.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Right. Did you ever?
And I listened to it like probably a month after it came out. And I listened, probably not the best like situation, but I was alone in my bedroom, and it was completely pitch black, and I just sat there with my eyes closed.
What was your takeaway while you were listening?
Well, part of me thought, and I haven't listened to it recently.
Sure.
Because I'd probably think differently. But I remember thinking like just the honesty, and almost not thinking it was me. Because of, I don't know, just because I when I remember listening to it, I was like, that doesn't sound like me. That could be anybody, but it's not me. And then as it kept going, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my story. This is what's happening and what has happened to me. Yeah. And so I probably listened to it 3 times, of like one after another, and then I never listened to it
ever again. I can tell you this.
But then I would like sit. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to tell you that, I've recorded well over 1,000 interviews. You're the only person I've stayed in contact with afterwards.
Really?
I mean, there would literally be no way to do it. I get done talking to some people and I think I could be friends with these people, but I can't add a new person to my life every day. You know what I mean? But for me, like from my perspective, what I thought was, you're not going to be okay if somebody doesn't help, because there was no help coming from your extended family. You had a very strange relationship with your boyfriend at that point, in my estimation. I didn't see how he was going to be helpful. He was too young. You were young. And I actually thought, if I don't help her, this isn't going to end well, and I'm going to feel like I was responsible. And I don't want that for me, and I don't want that for you. So why not, let's just keep talking and see what happens. I'm very excited for you, honestly. I don't know if I sound like that, but it would have been easy to record with you and think, oh, that girl's not going to make it. And just be done. Like when you told me you were pregnant the first time, I thought that's absolutely out of this world. Like I couldn't imagine that happening. Like I don't even mean, just in no way, shape, or form, that you were like having a baby and thoughtful about it, and your email, like your note changed, like the tones of your note changed, and just seemed so much more together, for the lack of a better word. I was like, wow, I think she's doing it. It's pretty cool. Because it would have, again, if I had to bet after I talked to you, like if you took my hard-earned money and said, how's this going to go? I'd be like, I don't think this is going to go well. Why haven't you given up? Like given in?
Well, I think once before the pregnancy, I'm not sure. But once I was pregnant with our son, that's when I completely, like, that's probably when I started caring about my diabetes the most in my life, because I didn't want to be the reason my in the future suffers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just had that in my mind the whole time, and thinking, it's not about me anymore. So I have to keep it together for this innocent human that, they never asked to be in the world.
Yeah.
And then every day since, because with him, I had him naturally, probably not the best decision. But with her, I had her C-section. And my 2 recoveries have been so different. I think if just with everything, if I would have had the same stuff happen with my first pregnancy, I don't think I would have made it. Just because I really didn't experience postpartum depression with my first child.
You did not?
No.
Okay.
With her, I feel like it's not this huge dark cloud over me every single day, but there's a cloud, and sometimes it's hard. And I started going back to work, and so I'm working from home a little bit, and just really just trying to take in having children and trying to be like the best mom I can be.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like, kind of my new goal when I started having children. Like, everybody wants to be the best parent, but it just gave me a sense of purpose that I feel like 4-5 years ago I never dreamed of having.
Right.
So there was no goal with that.
It's easier to take care of yourself knowing that if you don't, you won't be able to help them.
Yeah.
Right. And with the diabetes especially, if I'm remembering right, you were not exactly on top of things when I talked to you the first time. So,
No.
yeah, I remember your diabetes being an afterthought. Is that about correct? Like, you'd give yourself insulin if you had to, like that kind of stuff. Like when, like, your blood sugars got high. Was that the vibe before?
Yeah. Or like when I was younger in high school, I would just like stick an empty Omnipod on me, so it would suffice my mom.
Yeah.
But because I didn't care.
Yeah. Well, the depression and the mixed with the pressure from the diabetes, and you weren't even trying to stay alive, really, right? Like there was no feeling of like, it's imperative that I go on. You were that depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was for a long time in your life. I'm right about that, right? From how old do you think you were when you started feeling depressed?
Probably a sophomore in high school. So at least, well, that was over 10 years ago. Because I'm 28 now.
Wow, that's even weird. I'm getting older. You guys are just, you're aging nicely, and I'm getting old. How old were you when you were diagnosed? Remind me.
12.
12. Okay. 16 years ago.
Yeah.
And then 5-6 years later, in that range, you start feeling depressed. And your mom has depression?
No, but she doesn't like acknowledge mental health or mental illnesses like a normal, like her thought process was, you have a good home, there's no reason for you to be depressed. Like, she didn't understand, the underlying issues. And I think I remember telling you that I tried to go to therapy in high school, and the therapist that I saw, he ended up committing suicide.
I do remember that. Yeah. That's a tough one. Yeah. That's hard.
Yes. And so that really traumatized me as well.
Yeah.
And so I still have, like, I feel really good opening up with my husband, even though he is no way licensed in any way. But it's just somebody that literally, whenever I need to talk, he is there for me.
Speaking with him is helpful to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're not seeing anybody to talk to anybody right now?
No, I'm not.
How long did you?
Oh, probably 4 or 5 months of, like, sometimes it was 2 or 3 times a week. And sometimes it was once a week or every other week.
And you found it valuable overall?
Yeah, I there was a lot of things that I just let go of in my life because I thought, that is so much, like, no wonder I'm constantly stressed and constantly having headaches, like all of these little backpack things off of my depression. And so I finally, like, toxic people in my life, no longer talk to. Like, I could just instantly cut those ties.
Mm-hmm.
It helped me. And so I wouldn't say I live like a very minimal life, but not a lot of things like get under my skin anymore. And that has helped tremendously.
Well, so generally you live with that kind of like drifting cloud that sometimes is heavier and sometimes is lighter, but is always pretty much there one way or the other.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, just the anxiety of raising children and the pressure of that doesn't bother you. You do okay with that.
Yeah, I take a very like natural consequences approach. If my son is going to run and like eventually he's going to fall, he looks at me and I do not react. Mm-hmm. He doesn't react. He gets up and just keeps running.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff that I'm like, if I don't react or have a big emotion, it'll be better for him because he doesn't need me to react like that.
And by taking that tactic, that helps you not to feel stressed.
Yes.
Interesting. Oh, that's interesting.
And we live in a very rural town. There's, not even a warning light or a stop sign or a stoplight. Mm-hmm. And so he has no fear of the road as a 2-year-old. He'll just, like, we don't live on the main road, but he'll go and he grabs his like toy pirate ship and he'll just go, like, we just go play in our little cul-de-sac and he is just fearless.
Yeah.
And so I think with him having that demeanor, I am able to, I never say like, be careful or don't do that unless it's like a safety issue.
Yeah, of course. Do you find that that feeling that he exudes, are you able to kind of feed off of that a little bit? Off of that, like, don't be scared feeling?
A little bit. I think that when you put it into words like that, yeah, because he is a spitting image of me and with red hair, but he just has this little personality where he just is an explorer and an adventurer and wants to go and do. And that at this point in my life, that's the complete opposite of me. And so I just go with it. We make messes. We do so much, try to do so much experience stuff that even though he's 2, he's probably not going to remember. Right. But there's so much good with letting your child be messy and just doing those type of things.
Yeah. It's nice. It sounds like it might be freeing for you as well. I have a question. You've scheduled this recording and pushed it a number of times.
I know.
And every time it happens, I'm just like, that's cool. But there was a moment where I started to worry. I'm like, oh, maybe she's having like issues and they can't bring herself to do this. But do you remember, was it just life stuff or did you have moments where you're like, I can't re-record this right now?
It was never that. I think it was more, well, our time difference doesn't necessarily help.
Not at all.
That was kind of a struggle because then I'd put you in the back of my mind and then I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to do this, but I'm working that day or, different things. Or when I was pregnant, I just didn't want to, I guess. And when I was pregnant, I really tried hard to listen to the pregnancy episodes. Mm-hmm. And I think I got through about 10 minutes of one and I just sat and cried.
Did it just not feel possible?
It was just, yeah, because unfortunately, I should probably listen to the podcast more. I really have to still pick and choose what episodes I listen to.
I see. They can have an impact on you too harshly.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm just glad to hear that you weren't like you imagine from my perspective, after the first, second, third time, I was like, oh, she might not be okay, was my worry. I'm glad just to hear that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good to go. So when you hear some people's stories, when are they hard to listen to? If they're too close to yours, or if there's something you can't accomplish, or where does it get to you?
I feel that like anytime, like one that really sticks out in my mind is the mom that lost her diabetic son, I want to say.
In the car accident?
But still, yes.
Yeah.
Like those type of things where I just feel like I am mentally stable, but I just feel like my emotions are still pretty unstable. And now adding postpartum, that doesn't help.
Right.
But those types that it's just kind of pulling at your heartstring.
Yeah. Well,
that's where I struggle.
I have to tell you, if it makes you feel any better, was hard for me to talk to her, and it's still one of the like conversations I've had that sticks inside of me. So, I mean, I don't think that might have nothing to do with your history, to be perfectly honest with you. It's just hard to listen to. Yeah.
Well, and then I listen to a lot of like the after dark ones because I know those just have a different tone. Usually it can be a lot more heavy.
Right.
In the conversation. But I'm like, you know what? If this person can live and do things, I sure as hell can.
Oh, it does give you that feeling like they're going through this. I can do my thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Those episodes, my hope with those episodes is sort of like, partly I think people coming from my perspective can get some understanding for how other people's lives are. And then I also hope for people who are struggling to hear somebody tell a story of going through a similar struggle and then getting out of it, that can feel hopeful. So I'm glad about all that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And everywhere I go, I'm like, have you listened to Juicebox Podcast? It's phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. You're so nice. I think that your story will like stick with me for my whole life. It really will. It was one of the first times that somebody ever opened up like that. Talking to you really helped the podcast to grow, because I mean, I think you're like the third After Dark episode.
A fresh one.
Yeah. So basically my idea back then was like, well, like you smoke weed, you drink, we'll talk to you people. Right. And then I don't know where I thought it was going to go from them. Then I get this note from you and I was like, all right, well, I guess I said I was doing this, so I'll do this. And then we have this conversation and it's so like eye-opening for me. And at the same time, frightening to me, like, because I think there's no way you're going to be okay. Not because of you, but because you were isolated, because from family, because family wasn't that supportive of their mental health struggles to begin with, because the guy you were with was young. And then I remember feeling like that kid doesn't have the tools for this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm 30 years older than him and I don't know what I would do. And then your notes, it just felt like you weren't okay and that you really needed help. So like, even just being involved in, like, I stepped over a line for myself calling a place for you. Like, that is not a thing I should have been doing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, but that was the situation. The situation was so upside down. Like, do you know what I mean? That it needed something that ridiculous to happen. A stranger to call across the country and try to help somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know. It changed a way I look at some of this stuff. So, like in the future, like I can tell you that without your conversation, the day I get an email from this woman who says, listen, I was sexually assaulted in college and it impacted my life with diabetes, and I want to tell that story. Had I not spoken to you, I don't know what I would have done when I got that email, because prior to that, I would have thought this has got nothing to do with this podcast, and I don't have the skills to have this conversation with her. Like that. And by the way, I still didn't feel like I had the skills to have that conversation with her. I apologized to her before we started. I was like, I'm not going to do a good job. Like, I don't know what we're talking about here. And afterwards, I'm like, was this okay? And she's like, no, it was terrific. But I really think that the conversation I had with you opened a lot of that up for me. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how something like depression or anxiety, even, because I did not experience anxiety. I thought anxiety was like a fluke until COVID hit. And that's when my anxiety really ramped up. And I could understand, like, oh, I understand why people have anxiety now.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing how an event or just something like that can trigger. And then, I mean, diabetes is not simple by any means, but then how it trickles down to even that, or some, an event like being sexually assaulted, how that trickles down to your diabetes.
Yeah. When she even said that, when that person said that in that note, I was thinking, I don't understand how that impacts that. Like I don't know what she's talking about even, but I figured, well, she knows. And I have enough dexterity conversationally to get through this. So I'll learn something. The people listening will learn something, and, we'll add to the fabric of the podcast that way. But yeah, no, seriously, talking to you was really helpful for me. So, a lot of what's come since then is based in the, I don't know what the word is, but the courage I have to believe that I can do that, have that conversation, so anyway, I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you very much. So you have it's early in the morning for you. Your kids are still asleep?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Are you we're doing it though, right? We're getting through this without them waking up. So that's pretty cool.
Yes, it's nice.
I have to tell you, your note yesterday, it was in 2 parts. And the second part said, I just had a minor heart attack. So I'm trying to imagine, I'm coming out of the grocery store yesterday and I flip my phone up. You know how the iPhone does the thing now where you get there's a bunch of stuff on the main screen. They start to stack up a little bit. And the most recent one is on top. So yeah. I look and it's from you and it says, I just had a mild heart attack. And I thought, oh my God, you had a heart attack? So I sit in my car and I whip it open and I'm getting ready to say all I could think is wow, the people love this podcast so much that even after they have a heart attack, they still think the message. And instead I realized that it was the extension of your first message, which is, hey, my kids are sick and blah, blah, blah. And I just realized I have this recording with you tomorrow. I just had a mild heart attack. You were being, you were joking.
Yeah.
But for 35 seconds, I thought you had a health issue. And I was oh my God, I was so stunned. When I got in the car at the grocery store. Anyway, I'm glad you did not have a heart attack.
Me too.
Yeah, right. Easy thing to be glad about. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should have?
I don't think so. I feel just the first time, the tones and my mental load, obviously it's different now, but it's night and day different, I feel. And I feel even listening, and you listening to me right now while we record this, I just feel it could almost be 2 different people.
Oh, anybody who hasn't heard your episode goes back and listens to this, they're going to think, I can't believe that girl's alive to have that second conversation. Seriously. Yeah. For certain. Episode 336, After Dark, Depression and Self-Harm. It went up on May 14th, 2020. We're recording now in October 2023. So this is over 3 years ago.
Yeah. And I think at first I was trying to do a year after.
Yeah. No, you've rescheduled more times than I have fingers on one of my hands, I think. So, yeah. And I'll be honest with you. I once said to my wife, so I'm hey, I got to go record. And I went upstairs and then I realized that you had canceled it. And I came back down and my wife goes, what happened? And I said, oh, they rescheduled. And she goes, okay. And it happens. I don't want to give people the freedom to do this all the time, but I'd say 3 or 4 times a year, somebody reschedules at the last moment. And a couple times a year, people just cancel at the last moment. It's just part of it. It's how it goes, right? Sometimes I'll come downstairs and my wife will be like, what just happened? I said, oh, they flaked, just forgot the day or something like that. So my wife goes, did the person flake? She's using my words. And I said, oh, no, and I told her your name. I said, do you remember her from this conversation? My wife was like, oh my God, yeah, you're a pen pal. And I was like, yes, her. And, and I said, I honestly don't think I'll ever record with her again. Like, so that we're doing this today is even a little shocking to me, because I thought for sure this was going to just be a thing we did where you take up a day on my schedule, but we never get back together again. I really did think that's what was going to happen. So I'm thrilled it's not. That's why I asked you about it earlier.
Yeah. Well, and I feel part of it maybe was the anxiety of like not necessarily reliving that time in my life, but just
having to remember that was you.
Yeah, because I tried very actively to not remember like our like you helping me. I remember that.
Sure.
To a point, but like our conversation where I was in my life, I try really hard to not remember that. So it's kind of, hard to go back 3 years when I've grown so much.
Oh, no, I don't blame you at all. Like, there's part of me that just thought, like, if you and I ever talk, it'll be an amazing sign of, like, progress for you a second time. And that is how I feel now talking to you. I'm so thrilled that it kind of went the way I expected it to. But yeah, part of me just thought, like, letting you keep that date on the calendar, maybe, I don't know, was good for you somehow. So because my wife would say, you can't give these dates away all the time. You'll get behind. And I was like, nah, for her, it's okay. This is special. It's all right. Because there are other people, by the way, that after, like, if they cancel once, I'll be like, it's fine. You can reschedule it. And if they cancel a second time, I don't say, that's fine. You can reschedule it. I just go, okay, well, I'm sorry this didn't work out. Because they're going to be habitually flaky. I just didn't feel that way about you. I was like, I'm happy if this stays on my schedule forever. So,
yeah. Well, and then one thing I tried to do, like, not actively, because I, ebb and flow of you filling my mind, or like your podcast or talking to you or whatever. And so then I was like, every now and again, maybe I should message him and give him a little update on how I am and what I'm doing, so he doesn't think I'm dead or.
I like the notes. Don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah. Where I'm still a functioning person, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, listen, and it's very helpful to me at times too. Like I get a lot of messages, so I'm not the most communicative, like, quickly when I get messages sometimes. But do you remember the After Dark? Did you listen to the After Dark with the girl who was the stripper?
No.
You didn't hear that one? So she said something like, I mean, a couple of things that were really worrisome while I was talking to her. And she's another person who, like, I think about sometimes. Like, I hope she's okay. And she sent me a note a couple of months ago about some, like, pretty big changes and improvements she made in her life and things that she realized. It took, like, a long time after she recorded the podcast, but she realized, like, that what I said there was, like, that's not okay. I don't want to live like that. I was thrilled to hear from her, like, just that she had made an adjustment and a change and that things were going good for her. Yeah, I like that. I think trust me, there's people in my head I'll never speak to again that I think about a lot from the show.
Yeah. Well, and I never expected, like, for you to respond or even like a thumbs up. I would have been fine with from you, just because I was like, he needs to know that I'm mentally, like, I'm just in a better place.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for doing this again, and thanks for taking good care of yourself. Did you ever consider dry vaping your weed instead of smoking it?
No.
I've
thought about tinctures and, like, RSO oil.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have, like, a tincture that I'll put in, like, my coffee in the mornings just to mix it up. But I stay away from edibles because they do a number on my blood sugars, and it's not worth it to me.
Right. I was talking to somebody recently. I don't think her episode's up yet, but she has a number of different autoimmune issues, and she's, like, smoking CBD and like a whole bunch of different stuff trying to, like, help it. And it's interesting what people are doing to try to help themselves, honestly. Anyway, I'm just happy for you that, you found, I don't even think that you found like where you're going to be. It sounds like you're still moving in the right direction. Like you haven't leveled off. It sounds like you're still moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel as long as like my kids are growing up, which I guess they'll always grow up, but being children specifically, I think as long as they're children and like need me, that like I will always be moving in a forward direction because they give me purpose and they give me a reason to manage my blood sugars and make sure that, you know, in 20 years I don't go blind or, you know, all of those complications that could happen. You know, there are most days I do not want to do anything, but my son loves to be outside. It could be 10 feet of snow outside and he wants to be outside. And so he gets me out of my comfort zone and going and doing and just living. And so I think he doesn't know that I thank him for it, but I thank him every day for just getting me out of bed.
Right. Well, and then do you think long term you'll be able to find a reason that doesn't involve another person, that hopefully when they get older you can, you know, find some happiness for yourself and then still be there for them as a mom who's not with them every day?
I hope so. And maybe as I get older or you know, since I'm only 28, and so maybe in my 30s, I'll like, I don't know if it's a light bulb or just working in that forward direction of life, I guess, and not going backwards.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll figure something that gives me inner peace and I don't need to rely on a force outside of me, I guess.
I wonder too if they won't make some more advancements in the use of psilocybin for depression, because there are a lot of trials going on now that say that people report that they do these. I don't know how they do it, right? The mushrooms, and you basically low dose mushrooms or something like that. And I don't know exactly what they do along with therapy, but people then, they're doing it with a lot with military people and PTSD and depression and things like that. And people report really like astonishing changes for themselves.
Yeah, I know a couple people that go on mushroom retreats where they are paired with like a therapist and then they microdose on mushrooms and they just sit with the therapist. So it's a controlled environment.
Right.
And whatever happens.
And a lot of people describe like rewiring and like a loss of their depression and things like that. Actually, there's a lot of work at Johns Hopkins University with this. I mean, they're doing like, if you Google Johns Hopkins psilocybin, you'll see they're doing looking at treatments for major depression. They say that I remember an article from a year or so ago. I could probably find it, but they were saying that for up to a year after the therapy, the people were still doing well. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Anyway, I feel like something will happen there, and eventually drug companies are going to figure out a way to monetize weed and mushrooms and stuff like that. So,
no kidding.
Yeah. Once they decide they can make money with it, then they'll figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm so happy for you. I'm sorry I can't use your name. A couple of times I've wanted to call you by your name, but I'm really thrilled for you.
Thank you. It's been a long 3 or 4 years, however long it's been, but I feel like our first conversation and what you did for me really projected, not necessarily like where I am now, but it helped so much. I think because, my ex-husband didn't know what to do. My family didn't know what to do. And just you going out on that limb, I think I realized like there are people in the world that truly care about me.
Oh.
And like 3 time zones away.
I'm sure everybody listening cares too. You'll never meet them, Well, Well, that's really lovely for you to say. I appreciate it. It was my pleasure, and it was uncomfortable for me. I mean, I can tell you that. But it just felt not just necessary, but I don't know how a person would have met you and walked away from you in that situation. Like, I can't imagine that. So it seemed obvious.
Yeah. And it's been, like when my episode came out, because you shared it on I'm assuming, if I remember correctly, like the Facebook group and that, and just reading some of the comments, that's where it got, like, where I started to get affected. Like, oh my gosh, these people listen to me, and just the community that you unknowingly we're building.
Right.
It's such a strong community, I feel. And it's people from all different backgrounds. And so it's nice to just, because I've pretty much taken like the Juicebox podcast and like put it on a back burner right now, just with my master's program and 2 children under 2.
Yeah,
and
you have a lot going on.
Life.
Yeah.
I don't commute as long as I do, or as long as I did. And I had that time. And so I'm unfortunately not as up as I should be, but definitely I probably go to the Facebook group 4 or 5 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I have stayed connected.
Yeah.
Not with you, but just with the community, because it is a very close-knit community. And that, even though I will never meet any of these people, it's just nice to know, like, there's other people in the After Dark series. I reached out to one of the After Dark people, and we messaged a little bit, and I followed him on Instagram and that stuff. And so I kind of am like a shadow in this world, in the sense of,
Yeah, I get my mentions, and there are times I'll see your name, liked your message, and I'll think, oh, good, she's out there. You know what I mean? Like, it's a split second. I see your name roll by, and my mentions are, I'm not bragging, but my mentions are like hellacious. They don't stop all day long. And it just to see your name like pop up in that list sometimes, I'm like, oh, good. Like, that's great. And to your point about the group being kind and diverse, I'm never not amazed by it. You watch somebody literally from Australia ask a question that's answered by somebody living in India. And then, and before you know it, you realize there's people from Mexico and Canada and all over the US and Germany, France, like the UK, they're all talking to each other, and they all have something to add. And even just hearing you now talk about how it even felt supportive just to hear people like conversate about you and your episode, to say like, oh, I heard that, and, have feedback and how that feels supportive to you. I mean, even those are things that, I can imagine them if I stop and think about it, but day to day, as the minutes are clicking by and I'm doing all the things I'm doing, I don't stop to think like, oh, that really helps them. That post actually supported you. Like that's really cool to hear. So I'm glad you said that.
It was really like hard to listen to my first episode and then read those comments. I think just because being, slightly in a different mindset then, and not, none of them obviously could reach out because of me being anonymous and staying anonymous, but just knowing that there are people out there that's more than like my husband or my family.
Yeah.
It's been very, it's really great to have just this outlet of, and I don't really post in it or anything. I might tag the Juicebox podcast every now and again or whatever.
Right.
But just knowing that when it comes to such a large part of my life of the diabetes, I know exactly where I can go to have 100% support from people, literally, like you said, literally 1,000 miles away.
Right. And you get to be yourself and the person from the episode, but you don't have to tell anybody that that's me. And I would imagine there's some freedom in that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I've seen people do it both ways, and it doesn't seem like there's a right way. It's, whatever makes the most sense to you and what's most comfortable for you. But I've seen people be like, that's me, and, talk to them, and just to know that you could see it and they were talking to you and they didn't know it. Like, it's all very cool. And by the way, that they were kind and generous and lovely, and not, you could have easily clicked on that link and somebody could have said something off the wall and it might have been bad for you. So that's great. All right. Okay, good. I'm going to let you go. You got to, by the way, what's wrong with your kids? What kind of illness do they have?
Well, I'm currently being treated for pneumonia.
Oh my God.
And the littles just have like stuffy nose, runny nose, cough, just crud.
Yeah.
And so it's not a very happy place in our home right now.
Yes. Nobody wants to be sick. That's for sure. But I hope everybody feels better quickly. And seriously, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, no problem. I am so glad we were finally able to connect.
Yeah. Let's get you back on the schedule now so we can record again in 5 years. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Perfect. Hold on 1 second for me. I'd like to thank AG1 for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast and remind you that with your first order, you're going to get a free welcome kit, 5 free travel packs, and a year's supply of vitamin D. That's at ag1.com/juicebox. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors. I was looking for a way that we could all get nice and tan and meet each other and spend some time talking about diabetes. How are we going to do that? On a Juice Cruise. Juice Cruise 2025 departs Galveston, Texas on Monday, June 23rd, 2025. It's a 5-night trip through the Western Caribbean, visiting, of course, Galveston, Costa Maya, and Cozumel. I'm going to be there. Erica's going to be there, and we're working on some other special guests. Now, why do we need to be there? Because during the days at sea, we're going to be holding conferences. You can get involved in these talks around type 1 diabetes, and they're going to be Q&As. Plenty of time for everyone to get to talk, ask their questions, and get their questions answered. So if you're looking for a nice adult or family vacation, you want to meet your favorite podcast host, but you can't figure out where Jason Bateman lives, so you'll settle for me. If you want to talk about diabetes, or you know what? Maybe you want to meet some people living with type 1, or just get a tan with a bunch of cool people. You can do that on Juice Cruise 2025. Space is limited. Head now to juiceboxpodcast.com and click on that banner. You can find out all about the different cabins that are available to you and register today. Links in the show notes, links at juiceboxpodcast.com. I hope to see you on board. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.